The Martins were just like any other family chasing a better future, a fresh start, a chance to breathe again. David Martin, a dedicated public school teacher, had just accepted a position in a quiet suburban town, Ridgewood Hills. It was the kind of town where the grass was always cut, where joggers waved as they passed, and where every street had trees lined up like soldiers guarding secrets. His wife, Vanessa, was a nurse, calm, gentle, sharp as a blade when it came to protecting her kids. Their children, little Maya, age 6, and James, age 9, were the kind of kids you'd see in a cereal commercial. Smart, polite, full of questions about the world. They had lived in the city their whole lives, and while they loved it, they also knew it wasn't where they wanted their kids to grow up forever. They wanted space, safety, a place where Maya could ride her bike without dodging traffic, where James could sleep without sirens singing through the night. So they packed their lives into cardboard boxes, rented a U-Haul, and set off for Ridgewood Hills, full of hope, full of dreams. The town seemed perfect. Great schools, quiet streets, parks on every corner. And that air, clean, open, honest air that smelled like opportunity. The Martins weren't rich, but they had good credit, solid jobs, and savings. They weren't looking for a mansion, just a home. A place with enough rooms, a backyard. For the kids, maybe a porch swing. After a week of searching, they found it. A charming 2-story home on Willow Creek Drive, white picket fence, big front yard. Sunlight pouring through every window. It was everything they had dreamed of. Vanessa turned to David with a smile so wide it hurt to look at. "I can see us here," she whispered. And he could too. The listing was handled by a private landlord, someone named Gerald Whitman. They didn't think twice. They filled out the rental application that night, paid the fee, submitted their employment letters, credit reports, references. Everything was in order, perfect even. 2 days passed, then 4, no call. On the 5th day, David decided to follow up. He dialed Gerald's number, hopeful. It rang, then rang again. Finally, a gruff voice answered. "Yeah?" "Hi," David said cheerfully. "This is David Martin. My family and I applied for the rental on Willow Creek. Just checking in." "Oh, right. Yeah. I looked over your stuff," Gerald cut in flatly. David waited. Silence. "And?" he asked gently. Gerald let out a breath. "Place is already taken. Didn't you get my email?" "No, sir," David replied, checking his inbox. "I didn't see anything come through." "Well, someone else got it," Gerald said quickly. "Have a good day." Click. The line went dead. David stared at his phone. Something didn't sit right. No follow-up, no offer to consider them for other properties, no discussion. He shrugged it off, trying to stay positive. "Maybe someone really did beat us to it," he told Vanessa that night. She nodded slowly. But there was a weight behind her eyes, one that only black parents in America understood. That maybe it wasn't just about timing. Maybe it was about something else. They moved on, started applying to other listings. But day after day, rejection after rejection, they kept hearing the same thing. Already rented. Application not accepted. Landlord chose someone else. And yet, every time they drove by the properties later, they saw the same thing. Empty windows. For rent signs. No moving trucks, no new tenants. Something wasn't adding up. Then, one afternoon, as David drove past the Willow Creek house again, he noticed a white couple, mid-30s, BMW parked out front, touring the home with Gerald, himself. They were laughing, shaking hands. The woman even took a selfie with the "Just Listed" sign. David's stomach dropped. He parked across the street and sat in silence. His fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Not in rage. Not yet. In realization. A quiet, awful realization that chilled him deeper than the autumn wind outside. This wasn't bad luck. This was something else. Something uglier, older, and far too familiar. That night, David sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open but untouched. Vanessa paced slowly behind him, her arms crossed, her thoughts racing. Neither of them wanted to say it out loud, but the silence between them said everything. "It's not just that one house," Vanessa finally said, her voice quiet. "It's every house, every listing, every time." David closed the laptop, looked up at her. "You think it's us?" he said. "I think it's what they see when they open our application," she replied. "Our names, our faces, the color of our skin." David leaned back in the chair, the weight of her words pressing down. It wasn't paranoia. It was truth. They'd seen it before, in restaurants, in job interviews, in the way store clerks followed them a little too closely. But here, in this town, where they had come for peace, it hit differently, because this time, it wasn't just them being judged, it was their children, their future. "Then let's test it," a voice said. Both turned. It was Mark, David's old college friend who had moved nearby a year ago. He was visiting for dinner and had overheard the whole conversation. Mark was white, friendly, a marketing consultant with an easy smile and a deep sense of justice. "What do you mean?" Vanessa asked. Mark pulled up his phone and opened the same listing site. "The Willow Creek house is still listed online," he said. "No updates, no new tenants." David narrowed his eyes. "So?" "So I'll apply," Mark said. "Same. Job type, same salary range, same credit score. I'll use your numbers, just with my name, my face." Vanessa blinked. "You'd do that?" Mark nodded firmly. "If he's discriminating against you because you're black, we're gonna find out." David hesitated. It felt risky, but it also felt necessary. "All right," he said. "Let's see what happens." The next morning, Mark submitted the application. Same salary, copied from David's job offer. Same family size, 1. Wife, 2 kids. Same credit score. David's exact number. The only difference? The photo. The name. The skin. They waited. 1 day passed. Then 2. On the 3rd day, Mark's phone rang. "Hi, this is Gerald Whitman," the voice said, cheerful. "I just reviewed your application. Looks great. When would you like to come tour the house?" Mark nearly dropped the phone. "Wow, that's fast," he said casually. "I thought it might be taken already." "Oh no, still available," Gerald replied quickly. "People apply, but not all of them are. The right fit, you know." Mark's jaw clenched. "I think I understand," he said, voice cool. Gerald laughed. "Good. I like people who get it. So when can I show you the place?" Mark scheduled a tour for the next day. He hung up, then turned to David and Vanessa, who sat frozen in their chairs. There it was. Proof. Undeniable. Ugly. Real. David's face was tight with quiet anger. Vanessa wiped a tear that had crept down her cheek. "He didn't even ask for references," she said softly. "Didn't hesitate. Didn't delay." David shook his head slowly. "It's not just a feeling anymore. It's fact." Vanessa stood up, voice trembling. He looked at our names, our faces, and decided we weren't worthy of his house. Not because of our credit, not because of our income, but because of our skin. The room was silent. Then Mark spoke again, his voice steady. "Let's take it one step further." David looked up. "What do you mean?" "I've got a friend," Mark said. "A local journalist, investigative. She's done exposés on housing discrimination before. If we take this to her, quietly, she might help us tell this story the right way." David hesitated. He had always believed in staying low, keeping calm. But this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Maya and James and every other black family that might try to rent in Ridgewood after them. He looked at Vanessa. She nodded once. "Let's do it," David said. Mark picked up his phone and, just like that, the story stopped being private and started becoming something much, much bigger. Her name was Nina Clark, award-winning investigative reporter, known for her calm voice, sharp mind, and fearless journalism. When Mark called her and explained the situation, she didn't hesitate. "Send me everything," she said. "Emails, applications, time-stamped messages, all of it." Within 24 hours, Nina was sitting in David and Vanessa's modest living room, voice recorder on, notebook open, questions firing like arrows. She listened carefully. Every word, every pause, every wince in Vanessa's voice when she described being overlooked. Every tightening of David's jaw as he recalled watching someone else shake hands with their would-be landlord. When the story was laid out, all the facts, all the timing, all the proof, Nina leaned back and smiled. "I've seen this before," she said, "but not this clearly, not this cleanly. This is airtight." David looked at her, hope and fear dancing in his eyes. "Can you really do something with this?" Nina nodded. "Oh, we're not just going to do something. We're going to flip the whole town upside down." The next day, Nina made a few quiet phone calls, pulled a few favors, and by that weekend, she had her plan. It would be a sting, carefully designed, perfectly controlled, undeniably ethical, and impossible to ignore. She would have two couples apply for the same rental, both actors, one white, one black, same income, same credit score, same family structure, same references. They would submit applications within minutes of each. Nina would document every step, emails, phone calls, responses, and all interactions would be recorded under full legal compliance. She wasn't going to just tell a story. She was going to expose a system. It started on a Monday. The black couple applied at 9:03 a.m. Their application was flawless. By 11:30 a.m., they received a polite rejection email from Gerald Whitman. "We've decided to move forward with another applicant. Best of luck. No phone call, no tour, nothing." At 12:01 p.m., the white couple submitted their application, identical in every way. At 12:27 p.m., Gerald called. Eager, friendly. "Let's get you in to see the house." He even offered a discount on the deposit if they could sign quickly. Nina had it all on tape. Every second, the tone in his voice, the fake charm, the clear favoritism. It was undeniable. 3 days later, Nina sat in her studio editing bay. Headphones on, eyes locked on her screen. She wasn't just editing video. She was cutting through decades of denial, voice clips, split-screen emails, side-by-side timelines. Everything lined up. It wasn't just bias. It was active discrimination. Clear as day, and Gerald? He didn't know what was coming. Yet. That Friday, Nina made one last phone call. This time to Channel 5 News, a regional network with millions of viewers. "I have a story," she told the producer. "Time-stamped, recorded, fully documented. Housing discrimination. In your backyard. Do you want it?" They didn't hesitate. "You've got 90 seconds in the evening news, prime slot." And just like that, the Martins' private pain was about to become public truth. Across town, Gerald Whitman sat on his back patio, sipping coffee, completely unaware. He had done this kind of thing a dozen times, maybe more. It was easy. Smile at the white couple. Ignore the black one. Say it was already rented. No one ever questioned him. No one ever looked too close. Until now, because in less than 72 hours, his name would be on every screen. His voice, his own words, would betray him, and when the media showed up, he'd regret it more than he ever imagined. It was 6 p.m. sharp. The intro music of Channel 5 News played across living rooms, cafes, restaurants, and cell phones all across the region. The anchor smiled into the camera, confident, cool. We begin tonight with a story that's sparking outrage across the city, and possibly across the country. An investigative report by Nina Clark has uncovered what appears to be blatant racial discrimination in housing applications, right here in Ridgewood Hills. Cut to black. Then, boom. Footage rolled. Side-by-side applications, date stamps, phone call recordings, voice clips of Gerald Whitman laughing, offering discounts to the white couple, and ignoring, outright rejecting, the black family. Nina's voice narrated with calm precision. This was not a coincidence. This was not a misunderstanding. This was systemic bias, clear, documented, and illegal. The report lasted just under 90 seconds, but it was more than enough. By 6:05 p.m., phones were buzzing. By 6:10, the story had been clipped, captioned, and reposted all over Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and by 6:30, Justice for the Martins was trending. Across town, Gerald was still outside, beer in hand, dog at his feet, when his neighbor called out over the fence. "Hey, Gerald? You see the news tonight?" Gerald smirked. "I don't waste my time on that crap." The neighbor blinked. "Well, you're on it." Gerald's smile faded. "What?" "Turn on Channel 5, the neighbor said. "Right now." Gerald marched into his house, grabbed the remote, flipped on the news, and there he was. His name, his face, his voice. "We're looking for the right kind of tenants, you know. Some people just don't fit here." Words he had said without thinking, now playing across every screen in the city. The footage cut to an interview clip. David Martin, seated beside Vanessa. "We just wanted a fair chance," David said, composed but visibly emotional. "We weren't asking for favors, just to be treated like human beings," Vanessa's voice followed. "When we were rejected, I felt hurt. But when we realized why, I felt rage." The camera zoomed out as Nina concluded her piece. The Martins were not alone. Since this story broke, 5 more families have come forward with similar stories involving Mr. Whitman. Tonight, Ridgewood Hills is being forced to confront a question. What kind of community do we want to be? Cut. End of segment. But it was just the beginning. Gerald stared at the TV in horror, his face pale, his hands shaking. "This is taken out of context," he muttered. This is slander." But the phone calls began immediately. His business partner, his lawyer, his tenants, his ex-wife. And then his inbox flooded. His Facebook wall turned into a war zone. Google reviews tanked. Tenants threatened to break their leases. By 7 p.m., someone had spray-painted "racist landlord" on his garage. At 7:15, protesters began to gather outside his office, small at first, but growing. Some had signs. "Fair housing for all. Black families deserve homes too." "Accountability now," a local councilwoman posted a tweet. Shocked but not surprised. If this happened in Ridgewood Hills, how many other landlords are doing the same? Time for reform. Justice for the Martins. Gerald tried calling Nina, straight to voicemail. Then he called Channel 5's station. No answer. Panic rising in his chest, sweat on his forehead. His carefully curated life, the rental properties, the country club reputation, the clean-cut image, was crumbling. And for the first time in his privileged life, Gerald Whitman felt fear. Real fear. Not for his safety, but for consequences. Because, for once, his actions had been seen, recorded, shared, judged, and this time, he wouldn't be able to sweep it under the rug. By the next morning, the damage was done. And it was spreading fast. Emails, petitions, news outlets reaching out for statements, activists tagging Gerald in thousands of posts. But Gerald? He wasn't ready to admit anything. He still believed, in that deep, delusional part of himself, that he could fix it, spin it, control the narrative. So he did what men like him always do when the spotlight turns too hot. He deflected. At 9:15 a.m., he released a statement to the press, typed in Times New Roman, posted from his decades-old business Facebook page. I am deeply sorry if any of my actions have been misinterpreted. I have always tried to rent to people who I believe are the best fit for the neighborhood. This story is one-sided, sensationalized, and does not reflect my full character. I do not discriminate. I simply have a right to choose the best tenants for my properties. The backlash was immediate, if misinterpreted, the best fit. He didn't even bother denying it properly. Comments flooded in like a tidal wave. The best fit? You mean white? You got caught. Own it. You don't deserve to own homes, Gerald. People deserve homes. Imagine being so racist you think this is a good apology. Even worse, Channel 5 picked it up and tore it apart on live TV. Nina Clark, calm as ever, read the full post, then paused and simply said, Sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't hatred. It's the belief that you can say anything and never be held accountable. The clip went viral, again. By lunchtime, 3 local housing attorneys had gone public, stating they were opening civil rights lawsuits on behalf of the Martins and other families Gerald had rejected. One of them even added, This isn't just a case. This is a pattern, and we intend to prove it in court. Meanwhile, more stories poured in. Former tenants, past applicants, people of color who had quietly walked away years ago thinking it was just bad timing. Now, they were finding their voices. One woman posted a video. Gerald denied me 5 years ago. Same house, same story. I had good credit, good income. I was young, black, and hopeful. That hope died that day. But watching the Martins stand up, it's coming back. The comments exploded. Shares, duets, media requests. This wasn't just a news story anymore. It was a reckoning. Desperate, Gerald scheduled an interview with a small conservative talk radio station that agreed to let him speak his side. He fumbled through excuses. I'm being targeted. This is cancel culture. The media twisted everything. This is reverse racism. But nobody was buying it. Because the tape didn't lie, the applications didn't lie. His own voice, recorded, smug, and dismissive, didn't lie, and for once, people were listening to the truth, not the spin. While Gerald tried to survive, the Martins tried to breathe. They had been thrust into the center of something huge, something powerful, something exhausting. David kept working. Vanessa stayed focused on the kids. But their inbox was exploding with interview requests, messages of support, even hate mail. We believe you. We're with you. Thank you for speaking out. And sometimes, you people always play the race card. But they stayed grounded, because they hadn't asked to be heroes. They just wanted a home. That week, the city council called for an emergency public forum on housing discrimination. Local news trucks lined the street, and the Martins, they were invited to speak. David hesitated. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't an activist. He was a father, a man who'd tried to rent a home, and had been told, silently but clearly, you don't belong here. So when he stepped up to the microphone, holding Vanessa's hand, he didn't speak like a lawyer. He spoke like a man who had carried too much for too long. This isn't about me, he said, voice steady. It's about everyone who ever walked into a room and felt small. Everyone who ever got told no, not because of what they had, but because of what they looked like. We don't want revenge. We want fairness. We want the same chance you'd give your neighbor's kid. Silence fell over the room. Then, applause, loud, long, raw. Because the city didn't just hear him, they felt him, and that night, the tide truly turned. It didn't take long. Less than 2 weeks after the story aired, the consequences began to land. Hard, loud, unavoidable. Gerald Whitman, once just another quiet, controlling name on too many leases, was now a public example. And the law had finally caught up to him. The first blow came from the City Housing Authority. His landlord license, revoked, effective immediately. The reason? Violation of fair housing regulations and failure to comply with anti-discrimination standards. Gerald tried to appeal, tried to claim it was all political, but the board didn't even blink. The evidence was overwhelming. His emails, his recordings, his pattern. Next came the second hit, even worse. The Civil Rights Commission launched a formal lawsuit, and it wasn't just from the Martins anymore. Now, 8 families were on the case. Black, Latino, single mothers, veterans, people who had for years quietly swallowed the humiliation and walked away. But now, they were ready to speak. Their affidavits were heartbreaking. He told me to my face the unit was taken, then rented it to a white woman the next day. He said I wouldn't be comfortable in that neighborhood. He asked if my kids would be loud before he even asked my name. Each story added a brick to the wall of truth. Each one made Gerald smaller, less defensible, less human in the eyes of the public. The final blow came when the bank called, his mortgage lender. They were re-evaluating his accounts. Some properties were in default. Gerald had built his empire on rent checks. Now tenants were leaving in droves. Nobody wanted to live in that racist landlord's house. His cash flow? Gone. His reputation? Demolished. His empire? Crumbling. One reporter even described it best. It wasn't just a fall from grace. It was a free fall with no parachute. Meanwhile, across town, a very different kind of story was unfolding. The Martins had been quiet, graceful, focused on healing, but support poured in. Daily. Strangers sent flowers. Former students of David's wrote thank you letters. Churches organized food trains. Local businesses reached out to offer rental homes for free. One message from a woman in Seattle simply said, "You spoke for people like me. I've cried every night since your story aired, not just for what happened to you, but for how strong you stayed." David and Vanessa tried to stay grounded. They still woke up at 6. Still packed lunches. Still told Maya to do her homework and James to brush his teeth, but something had changed, not just outside them. Inside, they no longer felt small, they no longer felt invisible, they felt seen, heard, respected. Then came the letter, official, stamped, sealed. A settlement. Gerald, advised by his attorneys, had agreed to pay a significant financial restitution to the families involved, especially the Martins. Part of the agreement. He would forfeit the Willow Creek property, the one he had denied them. Vanessa read the letter 3 times, then once more, just to be sure. It was real. The house, the porch, the front yard with the swing. The dream they had once been told they could never have was now theirs. David looked at her, stunned. "You okay?" he asked. Vanessa wiped a tear, then smiled. "I think justice has a porch." They laughed. Not a loud laugh, not a bitter laugh. A quiet, healing one. And just like that, the Martins weren't just renters anymore. They were homeowners. In the very neighborhood that once rejected them. Except now. Neighbors brought pie. People waved. The school sent a handwritten welcome note. It wasn't perfect. Not yet, but it was better, and it was theirs. The house was more than wood and walls. It was proof that when the truth is loud enough and the cameras are rolling and the community refuses to look away, justice shows up, even if it takes a little time. The keys felt heavier than they should have. Not because of the metal, but because of everything they represented. David stood in the doorway of the Willow Creek house, keys in hand, kids at his side, and Vanessa beside him. He looked down at Maya and James. Maya clutched her stuffed elephant. James held a cardboard box filled with his favorite books. "Ready?" he asked. They both nodded. He slid the key into the lock, turned it. The door creaked open, and just like that, they were home. But this wasn't just a home. This was a statement. A quiet revolution. A chapter that had almost been erased, but got rewritten. The house had fresh paint, new carpets, an open kitchen. But more than that, it had peace. No more cold rejection emails, no more polite racism, no more closed doors. Here they could just be a family. The first few weeks were quiet. Neighbors waved, some cautiously, others with genuine warmth. One afternoon, an elderly, white couple stopped by with muffins. "We saw you on the news," the woman said gently. "We just wanted to say, we're glad you're here. It's about time this street started changing." Vanessa smiled. Not because of the muffins, but because of the shift. Real change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it knocks softly, with baked goods and long overdue honesty. But not everyone welcomed the Martins. One morning, James came home from school. Quiet. Too quiet. David sat next to him. "What happened, buddy?" James stared at his shoes. "A kid said we only got this house because people felt sorry for us." David's heart sank. He reached for his son's hand. "Do you believe that?" James shook his head, but his eyes were glassy. "I don't want people to feel sorry for us," he whispered. "I just want to belong." David took a deep breath. This was the conversation he never wanted to have, but always knew would come. "James," he said softly, "we didn't get this house because of sympathy. We got it because we told the truth, because we didn't let fear stop us, because we earned it." James blinked. "So, we belong here?" David nodded, more than anyone. Later that night, Vanessa tucked Maya into bed. "Why didn't Mr. Gerald want us to live here?" Maya asked suddenly. Vanessa paused. "How do you explain centuries of prejudice to a 6-year-old? She smoothed Maya's hair. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "people forget how to see others with kindness. They think someone's skin makes them scary or unworthy." Maya frowned. "But that's silly." Vanessa smiled. "It is. But sometimes grown-ups hold on to silly things, even when they should know better." Maya thought for a moment. "I'm gonna be the kind of grown-up who shares," she said proudly. And Vanessa, tears in her eyes, whispered, "I know you will be." As the seasons turned, the house filled with life, movie nights in the living room, barbecues in the backyard, Maya's chalk drawings on the driveway, James's soccer cleats by the door. Laughter, joy, normalcy, but something else too. Letters began arriving, from strangers, from students, from single moms, from military veterans, from people who had once been told they didn't belong, but now saw the Martins as proof that they did. One letter, handwritten, simply said, "I was going to stop looking, but then I watched your story, and now I'm applying for my 15th apartment because of you." Vanessa folded it carefully and placed it in a box they kept on the bookshelf. A box labeled, "Why We Spoke Up." It grew fuller each week. One evening, James looked at his parents and asked, "Do you think the world is changing?" David looked out the window. The sun was setting, casting gold across the quiet street. Then he looked at his son and smiled. "Slowly," he said. "But yes, because people like you are growing up in it." The Martins didn't set out to be a symbol. They just wanted to be seen. But now they were more than a family who fought back. They were a light, a quiet, steady beacon, in a world still learning to see clearly. The invitation came in a white envelope sealed with gold trim. No fanfare, no flashing lights, just a simple letter that carried weight. A lot of it. The National Fair Housing Alliance was hosting its annual conference in Washington, D.C. This year's theme? Breaking barriers, building belonging. And they wanted the Martins, all four of them, to be guest speakers, to share their story on stage, to speak for the thousands who had been denied, ignored, or quietly pushed out. Vanessa was the first to read the letter. She sat at the kitchen table, rereading it under the soft morning light. David walked in, coffee in hand. "What's that?" he asked. Vanessa looked up. "An invitation. To speak," she said quietly. "At the national level." David blinked. "Us?" She nodded slowly. "They want us to tell our story, to the country." He sat down, stunned, then said the first thing that came to his mind. "But we're not activists." Vanessa smiled gently. "No, we're something stronger." He tilted his head. "We're proof." The night before the flight to D.C., James sat cross-legged on his bed. "Will I have to speak too?" he asked, a little nervous. David sat beside him. "Only if you want to," he said. "But even if you don't say a word, just being there matters." James nodded, gripping his hands together. "I want people to know I wasn't scared," he whispered. "I want them to know we belong." David placed a hand on his shoulder. "They'll know, son. Trust me, they'll know." The conference hall in D.C. was massive. Red-carpeted aisles, tiered seating, a sleek stage lined with LED lights, and framed by banners that read, "Housing is a human right. Fairness, equity, dignity." The room held journalists, policymakers, educators, housing advocates, and people from every state. And right in the center, the Martins. When their name was called, applause erupted, but David still hesitated for half a second. Not out of fear, but because the weight of that moment was real. He walked up first. Vanessa followed, then Maya, holding her elephant tightly, and James, chin up, standing tall. They stood together at the podium. David took a deep breath and began. 1 year ago, we were denied a rental home in a nice neighborhood, not because of our finances, not because of our credit, but because of our skin. We were humiliated, dismissed, told without words that we didn't belong. But here we are, not just because we fought, but because people listened. He looked out across the crowd, eyes wide, silent, waiting. We didn't want attention. We wanted fairness. We wanted a front door to open, not just for us, but for everyone who looks like us. And when that door slammed shut, we told the world. Vanessa stepped forward, her voice soft but unwavering. The hardest part wasn't being rejected. The hardest part was explaining it to our kids, watching them ask why they weren't good enough. But today, we don't ask that anymore. She turned and gently ushered James forward. The boy took a breath, then leaned into the mic. "We're not guests in this world," he said. "We live here, and we're not going anywhere." The room stood still for a moment, then erupted. Applause. Standing ovation, tears, cheering. It wasn't just for the Martins, it was for every story that had gone unheard, every moment of injustice quietly endured. Every kid who sat on a cardboard box in a living room that never felt like theirs. After the speech, people lined up just to shake their hands, to hug them, to say thank you. One woman whispered, "You gave me the courage to apply again." A man in a wheelchair said, "I finally feel seen." Later that evening, the Martins sat outside on the hotel balcony, overlooking the lights of Washington. Maya leaned her head on Vanessa's lap. James sat with a cookie in one hand and a journal in the other. David looked at his wife, and smiled. Do you think we made a difference today? Vanessa looked up at the stars. I think we gave people a reason to believe again. And sometimes, that's the beginning of everything. They returned home to banners. Welcome back, Martins. Thank you for speaking for all of us. Neighbors they barely knew before were now showing up with casseroles, gift baskets, and quiet words of respect. We watched you on TV. You spoke like we all wish we could. You didn't just move into the neighborhood. You changed it. David smiled, grateful but grounded. We didn't do anything special, he always said. We just refused to stay quiet. But, in truth, they had done something special. And people all across the country were taking notice. Within weeks of their speech, momentum exploded. Nina Clark's original story was nominated for a National Journalism Award. Her email was flooded with tips about similar cases. More journalists followed her lead. In cities across the U.S., reports surfaced. Landlords screening names, rejecting families based on accents. Quiet discrimination, hiding behind fake reasons. Now, it wasn't just whispers, it was front page, and politicians started paying attention. A state senator from Georgia cited the Martins in a new housing equity bill. A congresswoman from Illinois mentioned them in a televised debate, saying, "When a teacher and nurse with two beautiful kids are denied a home, what hope is left for anyone else? We must legislate protection with teeth." The bill, the Fair Housing Strengthening Act, mandated harsher penalties, clearer enforcement, and funding for investigative watchdog units. It passed the state legislature in a landslide. David watched the announcement live on his laptop. He didn't cheer. He just sat quietly, holding Vanessa's hand. "This wasn't about us," he said. "But I think we just helped a lot of people we'll never meet." Vanessa nodded, and that's what makes it real. Meanwhile, back in Ridgewood Hills, change could be felt on the sidewalks. More families of color moved in. The local school board launched a diversity and equity initiative. Real estate agencies began offering bias awareness training for their agents and landlords. The Willow Creek neighborhood, once quietly exclusive, was now quietly inclusive. There was no parade, no viral video, just subtle, daily moments of grace, like the white neighbor who asked David for help organizing a fair housing fundraiser, or the mailman who left a note saying, "Your story gave my daughter the courage to apply to college," or the young Latina woman who knocked one evening and said, "I grew up in this town and never thought I'd come back. But then I saw what you did." One night, James was helping Vanessa set the table. He paused, looked up, and asked, "Do you think Mr. Gerald ever learned anything?" Vanessa was quiet for a moment, then said, "I think he learned what happens when people finally stop. Letting things slide." James nodded slowly, then smiled. Good. He didn't need revenge. He needed balance. And somehow, that was what justice felt like now. Not rage, not shouting, just the quiet power of truth. Finally standing tall. That Sunday, the Martins sat on their porch. Maya read a book. David sipped tea. James kicked a soccer ball back and forth with a neighbor. Vanessa looked up at the golden light filtering through the trees, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt still. Not because the world was perfect, but because they weren't afraid anymore. Their home, the one they were never supposed to have, was now the beating heart of a movement. It stood as a message to anyone watching. Speak up, stand firm, and never accept less than dignity. Because when people stand together, even the quietest voices can change the law. Fall came early that year. The trees lining Willow Creek turned golden overnight, as if the town itself had decided to start fresh, to shed old skin, to breathe easier. Inside the Martin household, there was warmth, real warmth. Not just the kind that comes from a heater, but the kind that comes from healing. The trauma of being told you don't belong hadn't disappeared, but it had been replaced by something stronger: belonging, earned, claimed, and protected. 1. Saturday morning, as sunlight spilled through the windows, Maya asked a question. "Mommy, will people still treat others like Mr. Gerald did?" Vanessa paused, put down her tea, knelt beside her daughter. "Maybe," she said honestly. "Some people still carry old ideas, but more and more, people are choosing better." Maya nodded, then whispered, "I want to help them choose better." And just like that, another light turned on. Weeks later, a letter arrived. Handwritten, no return address. Inside, a simple message: "I was wrong. I see it now. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. You changed me." It wasn't signed, but they all knew who it was from. David folded the letter slowly, then looked at Vanessa. "Do you believe him?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I believe change is possible, even if it comes too late." They never spoke of it again, not because it didn't matter, but because dwelling isn't the same as living. And the Martins, they had a life to live. Months passed, the house filled with laughter. New photo frames lined the hallways, birthdays, science fairs, backyard movie nights. But one photo stayed untouched, a black and white still from the night of the conference, the four of them standing hand in hand on stage, bathed in light. It didn't represent fame or pride, it represented proof. Proof that telling the truth, even when your voice shakes, can move mountains. Proof that silence helps no one. And justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks slowly, one step at a time, until it's standing at your door, waiting to be let in. And for the Martins, that door, it stayed open. Open for kindness, open for fairness, open for the next family who needed to see that it can get better, that the system doesn't always win, that change is slow, but real, and sometimes beautiful. And so, under the glow of a quiet porch light, with the wind whispering through, the trees, a story that started in silence, ended in something else entirely. Hope. Because when the media showed up, the world finally listened. And once the truth was seen, it could never be unseen again.